Alrighty, so we're here and got some people here in the comments already, so that's good to that's good to see. Um, we're gonna do a Pluribus season 1 wrap up, and this one's gonna be a little bit different than the other live streams that we've done or I've done so far this season. In that we're not got a lot of specific stuff we're trying to go over. I talked about every episode. I had guests on to discuss every episode, so we're kind of going to see what's going on. I sort of had a choice, like, did I want to invite everybody in for the wrap up that has helped out throughout the season, or just keep it simple? And I decided to keep it simple because one of the things, I love having people on, and I love being able to get different takes and hear what people are thinking and stuff like that. But in the process, I kind of sit there and I kind of listen to what everybody else is saying, so that I can, so that we can have a conversation. And I don't always get to focus in on what's going on in the chat. So I wanted to bring Gil back because he wasn't able to make it in the last couple episodes, and our schedules weren't matching up, and I really wanted to get him back in here. And so one of the things that I told him was, we're going to try to see what people are saying in the comments and try to respond a little bit. I do have a couple of things that we want to go over. And first things first, in case people are not familiar with you, why don't you introduce yourself, Gil?
Sure. My name's Gil, and I'm from the channel One Take, where I do a combination of things. Probably the thing I'm most known for is timeline videos, where I'll take a complicated franchise, most recently 28 Days Later, and sort of summarize the whole franchise in chronological order, including movies, if there are tie-in comics, basically include everything. Other than that, though, I also do movie reviews, and we also do podcasts, especially when there's a show we really care about. So far, that's mainly been Vince Gilligan shows and anything Game of Thrones related. And we like to do the classic recap podcast where you, after each episode, go scene by scene, analyze. And that's where Pete and I in the past have collaborated. And I was bummed that I wasn't able to get on. So I was glad you arranged this and could squeeze me in while Pluribus is still somewhat fresh.
Yeah, that was whenever we did Better Call Saul, you were generous enough with your time to agree to co-host throughout that whole final season. Mm-hmm. And so that was sort of the first time whenever I wanted to even do live, because usually I just want to focus on scripted stuff too. But with that show especially, there were so many things that came up, and I was like, man, I obsess over the episode, and then I just want to talk to some other people and see what they got out of it, like in an interactive way, rather than just reading about it or listening to a podcast or whatever. So that's sort of the thing, and you helped to get that going. I just wanted to point out that someone said in the comments that Ray Seahorn just won the Critics Choice Awards, which is I was expecting to happen, but that's good to see that it actually did happen. We know that she was snubbed, historically snubbed in the Emmys throughout the run of Better Call Saul. So
yeah, I think Vince Gilligan has to be so happy, because I know he said a big part of his motivation for the show was, I want to keep working with Ray Seahorn, and I want people to see that she's a star the way I see that she's a star. So glad to see her get some mainstream recognition.
Yeah. So I guess to start things off, how are you feel? Like, we're pretty far removed now. It's only been a week, but it was sort of an early episode, and then we had the holidays, and I know, we were talking a little bit for like the last few days. I wasn't really thinking about Pluribus at all. You know what I mean? Just because of other stuff. And so with a new set of eyes after that little break, what were your overall impressions of season 1?
Man, I love this show. I loved it from the first frame, and I continue to love it, even thinking back on it. It feels like, and I think I said this the first time I was on your stream, but it takes the quality, the sensibility, the meticulousness of Better Call Saul, and then applies it to my favorite genre of sci-fi. And I feel like it zooms in maybe even more than Better Call Saul did on character. Character is so important. It comes into focus maybe even more than this apocalyptic storyline of humanity versus this hive mind. The fact that you can do a podcast about this show and spend just as much time kind of dissecting Carol and Manusos's, Kumba's choices as characters, you can dissect that just as much as you can theorize about what is this hive really up to. And then we found out it's a giant antenna. What is up with that radio signal? You can talk about that stuff like this much, and then you can talk about character this much. And I feel like that is so rare for my favorite genre, sci-fi. I said it previously that it feels like Isaac Asimov, but if he could write character as well as all of his awesome, science fiction ideas. So I love the show. And if I were a younger man, I'd probably be very annoyed about the long wait between seasons. But as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate the value of having something to look forward to. Like right now, we exist in a between seasons Gilligan world. We haven't had that since the end of Better Call Saul.
Yeah. I kind of agree. I mean, I do love it when a show can turn it around fast. But at the same time, when something's worth waiting for, like I think what gets annoying is that a lot of these big shows, the production got so like insane that it sort of took longer, and then you had a lot of people vying for time because there was this this streaming boom thing that was going on where everyone was trying to hire everybody and do doing like the trying to hire everyone to get in to try to win the streaming wars or whatever. And so there was a lot of stuff that was getting made that maybe shouldn't have been getting made, and a lot of people like working all over the place, and it was kind of a bad environment. Like I can definitely understand how people want to go back to like, well, we're going to get it every year. But in this particular case, I'm with you. Like if it's worth waiting for, then it's worth waiting for. And this has proven itself to be that for me. And I mean, generally just getting older, like you said, I mean, yeah, like what else am I doing? Like I could complain if I want, but I'm going to watch it when it comes out the next time. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I love that the line in the sand that like, if you guys don't start making this faster, I'm going to quit watching. Like it's obviously a lie. So.
Yeah, and there's no risk that we're going to forget what happened. I mean, you and me are definitely not going to forget what happened because we're going to be doing recaps and all of that. And for the general audience, you can watch our recap, so you're not going to forget what happened between seasons.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Like today, this morning when I was getting ready, I started looking through all my screenshots to grab a few so I could throw them up there or whatever. And man, it was like there is just so much. And what's fascinating to me about this, and we're going to get into the ideas you were just touching on there with the idea of like what is good sci-fi, what is good TV, and things like that. But also like the thing about something that has this philosophical bent, like where you're really thinking about the premise and what it means and how you would react if you were in that situation and that sort of thing, like it was where there's no easy answers necessarily about what's right or what's wrong. You kind of forget like how many great small details were through this entire thing. Like going through the screenshots, there were so many things that I was just like, oh my God, that was such a great shot, or that was such a great little addition or a little detail that they snuck in there. And it's like, there was just tons of them, you know what I mean? Like it was just nonstop from start to finish. But somehow at the end, like you said, you're thinking about the characters, you're thinking about this idea, how they're going to react to this idea. So yeah, it's really, we're lucky to have something like this to think about, really, because, one of the things that I was thinking about, because you mentioned Better Call Saul, one of the things I was thinking about was when Better Call Saul came out, how there was an initial, people were initially kind of excited about it. People were kind of like, well, I don't know. That's not really a main character. I'm not too worried about Saul Goodman. I don't know how that's going to work or whatever. But I mean, it largely by about the third season, I think it was, it kind of disappeared from the, it wasn't the thing that everyone was talking about by any stretch of the imagination. Not like even a fraction of what Breaking Bad was. And then towards the end, it picked back up. Like people caught back up, people got in, and the end was really an event. You know what I mean? And everyone was all of a sudden saying, "Oh, it's one of the best shows ever." So it had this really strange trajectory, though, like to where, it was almost like just a thing that was out there in the world, not something that people were like obsessed with, except for like, a percentage of people who were just Gilligan fans in general. And I do wonder kind of at the end of season 1 of Pluribus where it's going to fit in, because TV's just kind of different now too. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. But
yeah,
I think
feel like Breaking Bad, if you compare it to Pluribus in terms of mainstream appeal, there are things that pull either one in opposite directions. Like there are a couple of things that pull Breaking Bad into that very exciting water cooler type of show thing, and then you have stuff that's pulling Pluribus more toward a niche audience. Though apparently they said it was the #1 most watched show on Apple TV, I think.
Yeah, they did say that.
But even just the fact that it's sci-fi already limits its mainstream appeal. And I think the fact that it is such a slow character-driven show also further pushes it in that direction. Breaking Bad was that too, but it had that shiny exterior of it was in the early days of the anti-hero, in the earlier days of serialized TV. So there was a lot of new to it, and it was very violent. So it was just a more exciting show where when you're waiting to see what the characters do next, it's like, oh, this is the episode where he melts somebody in a bathtub. It was just a viscerally more exciting show with a very obvious hook. We're going to turn Mr. Chips into Scarface. You go to Better Call Saul, and the opening scene is just this dour shot of a miserable Cinnabon manager. And it's like, we're going to take this fun person, and we're promising you that by the end of the series, he's going to be a lot less fun. So less fun that the show's not even going to be in color anymore. It's not quite the same hook.
Yeah, it is different. But if you are like we are into sci-fi, then there is that genre hook that you don't necessarily get from those other shows. I guess for my overall season 1 thoughts, I would say that I think it's an accomplishment. I think it works well as a proof of concept. Like they can make this work. The general idea is that they have 4 seasons in mind of story that could probably get a little bit longer. I doubt it would get any shorter, but I think that they've proven that they can make an interesting, they have an idea of what they want to do. They have some characters they can work with. They've set some challenges for themselves by having a lot of the characters being absorbed into the hive, which is fun. And I think so far that hasn't become a novelty. They've been able to make that, like you said, it still manages to be a great character story, even though there's that obvious thing, there that most of them are actually connected through the hive. So one of the things that I wanted to, and you brought it up already, one of the things I wanted to get into was, since a lot of people maybe are not sci-fi nerds, like what makes a good sci-fi? You know what I mean? Like what makes a good sci-fi story, and how does that, what can you do to get that out of, like, sort of to get it to shed the genre title, like where you have to say, yeah, it's good, but it's sci-fi. So, you're going to have to look at it through that lens or whatever. I think for me, what makes good sci-fi is that, and I mean, I read a ton of sci-fi, like that is what I've been reading for decades now, almost exclusively. So one of the things that, what I guess what I want is I want a story where they're going to introduce something new, or something is going to be different in a way that it changes the people's existence inside the story. And then I want to see how they react to that. And I don't necessarily go into sci-fi wanting to have my worldview confirmed. You know what I mean? Like I don't really want sci-fi to tell me anything. I want it to create a situation, and then I want to think about that situation. You understand what I'm saying? Like, a lot of times because of the Hive, a lot of times we've talked about Asimov and the 3 laws of robotics. And with that, like that's very simple for me to understand why I like that concept so much, is because he put something out there that's very easy to understand, very straightforward. And then he just looked for different ways to stress that so that it broke down.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So like you said, yeah, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? And there's a lot of what if in that, right? And so sci-fi, that's what I want, is I want some what if. Like, what if we did this? What would happen? And then I would like to have some really good characters that I can invest in. I would like to have, some moments that really wow me. But that's pretty much the draw for me. What about for you? What makes a good sci-fi story?
I totally agree with what you just said. And I would compare it to horror as well. Like a really great horror, like The Shining, for example, or The Exorcist, where it isn't just about jump scares and creating a thrill ride, which I enjoy those too. But if you're talking about elevated horror, I feel like what it often does is create an extreme situation where you can ask some questions and better understand human nature without putting it under a microscope. If you take a recent example, The Long Walk, a movie I love this year, where basically a group of characters have to keep walking. If you slow down too much, you get shot, you're dead. It's an extreme situation, and it makes it very easy to see friendships that form in that sort of extreme scenario, like in a war-like scenario. It makes it easier to observe humanity. I think this show definitely does that. Putting Carol and a few other old schoolers against the hive mind, it makes it really easy to ask questions about purpose, fulfillment, what is a worthy price to pay for happiness. For example, Kumba seems to be very happy, just basking in hedonistic pleasure, material things. Carol, to some extent, tries that toward the end of the season, gives it about 2 weeks, where she finds happiness, seemingly, in a relationship with Zosha, which is really the hive, which is essentially doing whatever they feel will most please Carol. So in many ways, it's a lie. It's like plugging into the Matrix. It's getting the perfect mate that, of course, you're going to fall in love with her. She's exactly designed for that purpose by the hive, tailor-made for Carol's mind. How long can that make you happy? Now, the interesting thing is, Carol's so inquisitive, it only lasts about 2 weeks, because then she learns that they have the frozen eggs, they're working on the stem cells. But we don't get a full answer to the question, because let's say they didn't have access to her stem cells, and that was going to take a very long time. How long would that experiment have worked? Would the happiness eventually have felt unearned and fake? Those are interesting questions. And a lot of people would draw connections to AI. I don't see the show as being about AI, but I think some of its ideas are definitely applicable to it. I think that's one. There's already stories about people having relationships with AI. So in a way, those relationships are fake, because the person you're speaking to is trying to please you, and there's no goal, there's no self-appointed goal for themselves. So it raises questions that are applicable to today. And can be applicable for a long time. It's not solely a contemporary thing. So that's just one example of, I think, what you were describing, where sci-fi creates a what if that helps you ask questions, but it's not purely speculative questions about where are we going in the future. It also helps you think about who people are today and in our nature, potentially forever.
Yeah, because that's what it comes back to, right? Because if it's good, then you can apply that to a situation that's going on in the world right now. As you mentioned, people compare this to AI because that's what's happening right now. But you could easily apply that to something else in a different era because of whatever people are doing, right? Because it's about what humans are doing with the thing and how they're reacting to the thing more than the thing itself. So yeah, I agree. Like, I think there is a lot of interesting comparisons with AI, but I think that if you just look at it like that, then you're limiting a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's more to be seen there, because the thing about the hive is that it's not completely completely what's the word I'm thinking of here? It's not, they're not completely manufactured. They were human. They still contain human memories and things like that. So one of the things that I'd like to get into before we get done with this is that the idea, talking about that idea of psychic glue in particular, you can see I have Kusamayo up there behind in the background. One of the things that I was doing this morning was I was listening to the official podcast, and they had a bonus episode that I hadn't heard. So I was just listening to that when I was getting ready. And one of the things that was kind of surprising to me was how cut and dry, like the way that how the black and white kind of interpretation of what happened to Kusamayu, from at least what I saw in the responses to the episode and to my video and things like that. Because there was this idea that, this was the death of culture. This was the death of family, that the scene was showing us just how evil and insidious the hive was. And that wasn't really my take on it at all when I watched it. You know what I mean? Like, those things are real, that happen, you're supposed to think about stuff like that. But I was also thinking that, like, she's clearly happy. You know what I mean? Like, what does the happiness mean? Is there anything real about that? Is there anything beneficial about that? Of course, it's alien to us because that's not how we operate. We operate as individuals first, and that's the thing that we understand. But, like, the idea of, like, people saying, well, that culture is gone. Well, culture is not individual. You know what I mean? Like that. So yeah, like, I don't know. I thought that was more of a, like, for me, it was more of a, like, how do I feel about that? Of course I'm on the side of humanity, you know what I mean? But, like, is it showing me that there's something that makes sense about that? And I guess what was interesting about the podcast was the actor and the writer of that particular scene, Alison Tatlock, and I don't have the right actor's name.
Smith. Oh, the actor's name. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't have it in front of me here. But she was saying that she understood that culturally. She understood wanting to join, and that she would probably want to join too, because the idea of being without her family and the way that they operate, and having them, basically be puppets to entertain her so that she's not completely lonely as an immune person, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. But I feel like we haven't really heard the pitch for why you want to join the hive. We've heard reasons why it's good for the quote unquote world. Nobody's fighting each other. Nobody's killing each other anymore. There's no robbing, stealing, violence of any kind. But to the individual appeal for joining the hive, we haven't really heard other than you're going to be happy. You're going to be content. It's great. And part of this is because we're following Carol, and she explicitly does not want to, quote unquote, ask them about their heroin, ask the drug dealer about their heroin. She knows that that's a dangerous road to go down. But even the examples you were just giving are more the stick. It's why you don't want to be excluded from the hive, because when you're excluded, you're surrounded by a puppet family, and it's all fake. So I can see why I would want to leave that scenario, but we still haven't seen the carrot of why you want to be part of it. And I would say, in terms of viewing it as a black and white thing where culture is erased in that moment, I will say, I think part of the reason people view it that way is because tonally, that's sort of what's being communicated. Like, having the goat crying after her, it reminds me of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was accused of being an emotionally manipulative movie because it shows you sad animals. And that is a very powerful tool. So putting that animal there and having her walk away and ignore it, that's going to upset most people, and they're going to associate that negative emotion with her decision to join the hive. So it feels like the show wants you to feel that way. And if they want you to debate, is the hive good or bad, I think it hasn't really made the case for the hive very much, except a little bit in the first couple of episodes. but at least tonally, I think the feelings it communicates to you are very anti-hive, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's it's interesting because I think that the intention of the show was to try to keep it balanced. So I'm not sure that they pulled that off. I think that what you're saying there is that they haven't made the case for that yet. And I think that, and I don't know if that's because it's just they underestimated how much people would be against the idea of losing their individuality. And I mean, this is something that exists in a lot of sci-fi stories that have that have a single consciousness or some sort of hive mind kind of situation going on, because it's, like I said, it's very foreign to us. But I don't know, like, I think if you think about, like, the Matrix is an obvious, that's an obvious comparison. I don't know that they were actually thinking about that or trying to make a comparison, but they, that's a situation where, like, yeah, it's pretty easy to see why that is not better than what we have going on, like, as humans trying to struggle with, all the things that means or whatever. Like, just being in a simulation, in a pod, whatever, like, not really great, right? Like, pretty obviously not great. So here, though, I don't think we've seen, beyond the concept of the loss of individuality. I don't think that we have, I don't think we have seen that.
Yeah,
but
the funny thing is about the Matrix is I've had many conversations with people where they'll say, I mean, partly in jest, but you can have a conversation of, I would be like I forget his name, but the person who ends up being a spy in the first movie, where he's like, I just want to go into the Matrix and eat steak. And they help you see that point of view, because that's compared to them on the outside, this drab, horrible post-apocalyptic world where they're eating this like goo. So I think they do a better job of making the balance where you can see both sides of it. And I would say probably my only critique of Pluribus would be that I don't think they've made the case for the hive. Now, that did not diminish my viewing experience of the show, but if that was part of their intent, I would say, I mean, objectively, for most people, that didn't come through. I have definitely seen some discourse online where people are a little bit more pro-hive, but I can only see it in theory based on some of the arguments the others have made in the show.
Yeah, I think that there's potential there. This guy says, if Pete saw a junkie high and smiling, he would call that true happiness. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, because I think, as knowing people who have struggled with addiction, one of the stumbling points, I guess, was that, they got to a place where they knew that it wasn't helping them, and it was only destructive. But there was a time when it did actually feel like it fixed something in them. You know what I mean? Like, there was a situation, or there was a time when they said, well, this is what my life has been missing, and if I have this, then everything's okay. And of course, it's, this is not exactly the same, because we don't know for sure that being a member of the hive is the same as being addicted to a harmful substance or whatever, but the thinking is the same, maybe. So that's an interesting thought process, because we have these people, we have Carol and we have Manusos, who are main characters, they're trying to assimilate, and they're trying to sell it to them, the hive. So, that's an interesting question. Have they just drank the Kool-Aid? Are they like, say, cult, like, someone who's trying to sell you their cult? You know what I mean? Like, if someone has been absorbed into a cult and they really believe that they found happiness in it, and the cult leader says, we need you to spread this to other people, because the only way that it will really work is if everybody joins and we all follow the same thing, you could go out there and try to sell that and feel like you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, you can imagine if this was a show explicitly about a cult, where the cult's like, we're all going to stop eating anything but what's already available to us. So we're guaranteeing we're all going to die out in about 10 years. But as long as we build this giant antenna first to spread the good word, we've accomplished our purpose. I can definitely see a sort of parallel to a cult. And the interesting thing is, you talked about if you're somebody on drugs, there is a period of time where you are content. It's filling some void in your life and it's making you feel good. And then eventually it crosses over. I guess often it will cross over at a certain point where it's doing more harm than good. And the interesting thing is the hive also has that limitation. Again, can't pick an apple off a tree. So they are all going to die out, or at least most of them within the next 10 years. And the other thing is, in terms of quote unquote drinking the Kool-Aid, you are sort of taking it on faith. If the hive describes to you what it's like to join, there's no way for you to actually know. Now, I guess there is that rule that they can't lie, but they can lie by omission, and they have all the best authors in the world and best psychologists in the world. They can probably craft the most persuasive paragraph possible to sell you on the idea of joining the hive, but you can't really know what it feels like and what it's going to be like until you're in there. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think in the writing and the construction of the premise and the show in general, they put some smart they made some smart choices to make that to mitigate that a little bit, because in reality the hive that has the access to all of that stuff should be able to just roll over the humans. You know what I mean? Like there really wouldn't be much of a show. And we kind of need it to be a show.
Yeah, they talked. I saw one interview, I think it was with Esquire, where they mentioned the fact that Carol can yell at one person in the hive and send them all into convulsions. And Vince Gilligan talked about the challenge of, well, if it's one person versus 7 billion, we have to give her a couple of tools that kind of levels the playing field. I mean, those are examples where you can see, okay, we talked about the gap between seasons and how long they spend building the show. I love the fact that a lot of that time investment is in the writing of the show. And I think that's where you see it, where this has been so thought out. Another example is that virtually every action the hive takes can be viewed through a malevolent lens, or you can see it as a little bit more benign or even benevolent. So, for example, when they leave Carol for 30 to 40 days, the malevolent read is that was psychological torture to isolate her, so we know she's going to come crawling back at some point. The other read is it was purely self-defense. They had to do it because, again, she can yell at one of them and kill millions. So we have to, we just need a little bit of space, Carol, as Howard Hamlin said. The fact that virtually everything they do can be read in one way or the other, I think is by meticulous design. If you didn't spend this much time thinking it through, they said that, everybody on the staff is keeping an eye out for what would make sense for the hive to do and what wouldn't make sense. If they're shooting a scene and one person's not doing something in the background, somebody will call that out and say, the hive would never have somebody just inactive unless they had to recharge their batteries for some reason. They're perfectly efficient. So you could see so much thought that's put into it.
Yeah. I there was one thing that I saw. I was just looking at the comments here, and there was one. I want to point this one out. But I want to get back to another one right after that too. Sterling Will, thank you for the $10. The hive only seems to display happiness when in the company of the unjoined. I think it's completely a ruse. This isn't something that crosses my mind much at all, if any, because they communicate telepathically. So they don't really need to display happiness. And this is something that you catch in all kinds of hive mind stories. It's sort of like the idea of lying, right? Most hive minds can't lie because everybody already knows everything. So like, I couldn't come up to some other hive member and be like, oh, I want to get this guy to work my shift. But I don't want to, I don't want to just straight out ask him. So I'm going to tell him I got something going on at home and see if he'll sympathetically ask me if he could take my shift to help me out or whatever. That kind of stuff just doesn't work because everybody already knows everything, right? So the idea that it's a ruse, I think that just comes back to how we think about something that's different than us, like we don't trust it. There must be something unseemly going on. And like I had a comment up a minute ago about cancer, saying cancer wasn't bad because all it wants to do is what its directive is. That's not lost on me. You know what I mean? And so to say that I think that it's not a ruse because I think that would mean that there was some kind of maliciousness. I think by design, what it's doing, if you care about humanity and you want humanity to exist, then it's obviously harmful. Like there's no way to dispute that, because humanity will not exist if they have their way. Individuality will not exist. But I'm just thinking about like, how is it an interesting story to keep going? And those are some of the questions that come up, is like, well, maybe it's not as bad as we initially thought it was, or maybe there's a reason why, we look at this and compare it to something that we see in our own life that it's similar to. But I, just for the record, I know this is a popular idea. I don't subscribe to the idea that they are, that they lie. I don't think they lie. Like, I think that's 100% true. I think they do use lawyerly language to skirt around things, but I think that you can mostly accept what they say as true.
Yeah. I also think, actually, if you look at the picture behind us, we have an image of Kusamayu smiling post joining, which would be an example where they are smiling with no old schoolers present. And it is something I paid attention to throughout the season. I was always looking at their expressions. And I do think there are several instances, even just now, I was looking at episode 2, where we meet Zosha for the first time while she's still in Morocco. And I feel like it's a hard thing to read, but I feel like you are seeing kind of slightly contented smiles, even if they don't need to communicate with each other. So you wouldn't necessarily need to smile so others can see you're happy. If it's just a physically involuntary, physical movement on your face because you're feeling contentment, I do think it's there. And I agree with you that they can't lie. I think it's a more interesting show if you take that at face value. If you have the kind of, Asimov's laws, this has its own rules, but if you have those rules and you find a way to be surprising while not violating those rules, for example, the fact that they eat people feels like a twist. And then when you look back and you say, what do we know about them on Carol's whiteboard? And actually, it's a very logical thing if you don't have human, I won't even say human, but if you don't have the morals and values that most people watching the show have, and you just follow the rules that we know about them, it's more interesting if it's surprising while sticking to those rules.
Yeah, I was going to say, we talked about what makes a good sci-fi story, and I think that's one of those things. Like, if you're going to, especially if in relation to how far out the what if is, or the thing, the new thing that they introduce that changes everything, I think the way that you ground that, and the way that because you have to suspend disbelief right from the outset. Like, you have to be willing to do that to a certain level. I think the way that a good story makes that seem okay is by establishing rules and then sticking to them. You know what I mean? And so, like, them not being able to lie, that is something you can work with. You know what I mean? Like, you can make them do that. You can still surprise the audience. It doesn't limit you. It doesn't limit them. It just means they have to come up with creative ways to work around that. Does that make sense?
No, definitely. And I think that's why it's a difficult show to write and it takes so much time, because the audience for this show is going to be frustrated if there's a twist that totally comes out of left field. I think this show, more than any, if something happened and you look back and say, how could anyone possibly have seen that coming? People generally get frustrated with that sort of a twist. But I think that would especially be the case here because of how it's been paced and the way things have gone so far, the quality we've come to expect from this show.
Yeah. Rennie Six says, are you still even yourself or someone different with your memories? Is there a continuity of consciousness? I think this is a big question that we don't know, or we're not even really supposed to feel like we know, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that, I think that's something that's for down the road.
Yeah. I also think when you were asking earlier what makes great sci-fi, and this is actually one thing I wanted to add. If I think personally what draws me to sci-fi, one of them is that the what if you talked about earlier, the what if itself is fascinating on its own. And it's something that is interesting to think about. Like if I compare Star Wars to, harder sci-fi, I enjoy Star Wars as a sort of action adventure, but I'm not interested in thinking about physically, how does a lightsaber work? Or what are the aliens like on this planet? Versus Pluribus, the question that she just asked, and thinking about how the hive works. What would it be like to be part of the hive? Those questions are in and of themselves interesting to me, even outside the context of the show. And I think when people get turned off from sci-fi, sometimes it's when it leans too much into that. It's too much just about the concepts and these fun thought experiments, and you lose character and story, versus this show where I think it's balancing them quite well.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah. But I would also agree that we just don't have enough information to answer that question of, is somebody's consciousness intact? We know their memories are, their skills are, but is there still a Kusamayu that has her own individual thoughts that then gets swallowed up into sort of the cloud, and then it makes grand decisions that moves all the human puppets around? Or is Kusamayu herself completely gone? Just her memories, her skills are swallowed up into one individual thing that just happens to know everything Kusamayu used to know. We don't really know, I think.
Yeah. Do you think they know? Do you think the writers know all the details of that?
I bet no. I bet they have some ideas.
That's what I think too, probably.
Yeah. I bet because even in interviews, when you talk about, okay, what the hive did to Carol, when they're, the quote unquote charm offensive, when they're being very nice to her and trying to win her over, is that manipulative or does it come from a good place? And they kind of, you get different answers from different people working on the show. That one example they gave, which I like, is they compared it to a grandma handing out candy every time you visit. Like, is it manipulative? She's just giving you sugar, literally a drug, to hook you on coming to grandma's house. But I think they have a general feel for how the hive works and what they would do. But I bet they have these debates in the writer's room, and they won't answer that question explicitly until they really have to,
Yeah, there was a lot of interesting stuff with it about the idea of the love, the romance between Carol and the hive. And, that's one of the things about love. That's one of the things about love in general. Like, you almost always, like, you show love because because it's, but I mean, you always get something out of it too, right? Like, even if it's just that you feel good, like most things you do, there is a secondary benefit for it.
Well, right? Can anything really be altruistic?
I was going to say,
doing a good deed makes you feel good, so you got something out of it.
Yeah, there's very little radical altruism, or something that everything gives you some kind of a benefit one way or the other. So, Jacob Kraus, thank you for the 5. Do you all think the formula that was used in Saul of giving us chunks of the conclusion of the story up front would work with this series? So I guess you're talking about what Gil brought up earlier about the
gene flash forwards.
Yeah, the gene flash forwards.
I feel like the fact that they have the count up timer, it keeps making me think at some point that number is going to be shockingly high at the beginning of an
Yeah.
episode. I mean, it happened in episode 3, was it, where they're at the ice hotel, and the moment I saw, I was like, wait, 7,000 hours, and then you see it's counting down. So I got really excited that this was some radical flash forward for a second. I have a feeling that we're going to see something like that at some point. This morning I was brainstorming on if I had to predict what was going to happen next season. I think it's near impossible to do that because they're trying to predict something that even Vince Gilligan doesn't quite know yet. But I feel like we're now that Carol is of the mind that she wants to save the world, and Manusos, of course, is in that mindset. There may be a little more next season of saving the world logistics. And now we have this electromagnetism route they can go down. I have this feeling, a hunch, that we'll get little flash forwards next season that maybe show elements of some experiment they want to run or some plan they're working on. So they have lost access to the hive at this point. They left Albuquerque again, and I feel like it'd be pretty tough to convince them. Carol says, I had a change of heart again. Can you come back a second time? So I feel like they're going to have to do something very heisty if they want to get the hive back and run some kind of radio signal experiment on them. So all that to say, I could see a scenario where you see a flash forward where it's like Carol grabs a piece of equipment, or they send a secret message to Kumba or something, and you wonder, what is this all about? And then you get to the end of the season and you see them turn on some radio tower they've been working on, some kind of experiment. I was just thinking back to Breaking Bad, where we would sometimes see hints, like the machine gun he had in his trunk. When the show was doing something logistical of pulling off a scheme, you would sometimes get elements of it and not see how it all fits together until they actually do it. So it's a kind of out of left field prediction I dreamed up this morning.
Yeah, I was wondering about that when I was looking through the images. I was wondering if there were some things that maybe slipped through the cracks, because they did set up a lot of things, like, for instance, like, let's see here. Oh, the milk, right? There was tons of milk imagery in the season, starting from, the very beginning.
Yeah, literally loading bodies onto a milk truck.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that didn't mean anything when we first saw it, but it did later. So I was trying to think if there was some stuff like that that they didn't really pay off in the first season. But nothing really came to mind yet. But I think they probably could have pulled it off, and I'm kind of glad that they went in a different direction with this series. To get to the question again here, I like the way that they use that device in Better Call Saul, but I don't necessarily want them to do that in every show they make going forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I almost feel like it was a defensive maneuver in Better Call Saul because they knew it was a prequel, which is another reason why I think the show automatically becomes less mass appealing. You know where it's heading. So you kind of open with, well, here's the thing you don't know. We're telling you right now. We're going to also go a little bit into the future.
But you don't know who Gene is, right?
Right. The only thing I'd say is it's clearly a tool they like, flashing forward, not necessarily to the end of the series, but I just wouldn't be surprised if we see that tool used to flash to something we'll see at the end of a season, for example.
Yeah, I love the cold open, they call them teasers. I love that format of making the teaser something that is can work in so many different ways. I forget which season in Breaking Bad where they had all the black and white. Which one was that? Season 2, I guess.
I think it was season 2, right? Yeah, where they showed like the teddy bear in the pool.
Yeah, they showed all those pieces. Like, that was sort of on a different scale, but that's sort of like the gene concepts first first test run kind of thing.
Yeah, they also liked playing with titles. So I remember that season in Breaking Bad, if you took all the episodes that had the black and white scenes, the titles, if you put them together, it said something like 747 down over ABQ. Then there was a Better Call Saul season where if you took the first letter of every episode, Fring is back. So I keep meaning to look at all the titles from Pluribus season 1. And like, is there some kind of anagram hidden in there that's like in season 2, Carol will blow up an A-bomb?
Yeah. So I guess let's go. We kind of touched on this idea of psychic glue, but you brought up season 2 and the frequency and stuff like that. That's kind of where I landed on with that, is that I think of the frequency that he knows about, that he discovered down there on his crazy going through every channel experiment for 9 days while eating dog food. I feel like that is a representation of the glue more than it's a like, all of them communicating with each other through that. So I think that he's right, that if he can find a way to cut someone off from that, which really shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, like that part should be kind of easy to get one person away. And you could just probably use a Faraday cage for that. But if, what I expect will happen is that once they do that, that person won't want to be separated from the hive anymore. Right. Like they'll be able to do it, but it'll cause more problems.
Because it's a thing that it's easy to forget is the first person who was infected already seemed to have the biological imperative of, I want to go spread this. So clearly this is not only a psychic glue, this virus. It also has something in it that innately tells them, spread this, do not harm anything. It's the various rules that we saw. So I think you're completely right. If they were to separate one person from that radio signal, it wouldn't cure them. It would just separate them. And it'd be very interesting to see what that does, because presumably they would no longer have access to the cloud of knowledge and everything that comes from other people's brains. So if you were to separate Kusamayu, okay, she'd still want to be part of the hive, but does she now only have access to Kusamayu's memories and skills? Or by joining, does your brain sort of start to take in other people's knowledge, and maybe you lose some of your own? Your brain becomes one node in this greater thing, and so then once you're separated, you've physically now changed in your mind. Those are fun questions. I'm not sure.
It's a real challenge to understand how that could work too, right? Because it's just like, anytime you think about that, you feel like there has to be someone pulling the string, someone at the top of the pyramid, right? Like someone who's like a queen of the hive, or a central executive. Like that, it's really, that's the part, I guess, that I'm most excited to see them try to flesh out as it goes on, is because I don't think that they took anything off the table as far as what we saw in season 1 so far. I think they can go pretty much in any direction they want to. And yeah, I think that's like one of those things where, what would a true hive mean? And I put up that question earlier about, the continuation of your,
consciousness,
like, of your consciousness. How does that work once it's distributed? We don't know for sure, but I'll be interested to see how they play with that idea, because at times in the first season, it seemed like they could pull up individuals. But whenever Zosha asked Carol about it when they were playing the game, she was like, it'd basically just be like sitting with you, right? And Zosha admitted, yes, that it would be, what I mean? Like, you would see a different body, but you would still just be talking to the hive, not to the individual directly. I feel like Lakshmi is a good entry point for that too, because Carol already challenged her about her son, and what, her son, that might be your son, but it's also your gynecologist and a guy you dated in high school. like everything that is creepy about that was just sort of, she just put that on her right away. And so that's something that she's struggling with all the time. So you could see that being an entry point for things to break down, because once her denial breaks down, that might lead to us understanding more about what if it's not her son, which I don't believe it is, right? You know, generally we're not supposed to believe it is, but her son is in there. If her denial on that breaks down, then that gives us a chance to get a better understanding of what that actually is. Then if it's not her son, what is it?
Yeah, agreed.
Sterling Will, thank you again for the 10. I think after all these years, we can totally trust the writers can figure out where Pluribus will go. I'm excited to learn more about the other characters of the Unjoined. Yeah, this is something that I put into the notes that I wanted to get to. And so I'm glad you brought it up, the other Unjoined. And generally speaking, because this was one of the things, you know, one of the things I'm willing to sacrifice in a good sci-fi story is character, if the premise and the sci-fi is good enough, you know what I mean? As I said, though, in a perfect world, I want both.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things this premise kind of does is it takes away those characters. But at the same time, as Sterling Whale points out, these guys know what they're doing. They've made TV shows before, successful ones that are quite good. And so I wonder where more characters we haven't met all the characters yet.
Yeah, there's what is it, six or seven other unjoined we haven't met, essentially the non-English speakers, excluding Manusos, who's now partly an English speaker.
And they certainly could say that, well, we don't know how it happened, but this one guy was over here, you know, in a cave or whatever for like a month before, you know, and somehow we missed him, you know what I'm saying? So like they're definitely going to introduce more characters. So I'm excited to, like Sterling Will says here, I'm excited to learn about some other characters, because if you just look at, like, this is the Carol show, right? Like, this is a TV show about Carol as the main character and how she reacts to this thing that happens. Everyone else is supporting, including the Hive in a way. But like, if you just look at how they introduce Manusos and how excited I am to see more about him in the next season, like, I'm looking forward to them doing that over and over again with different characters as things go on.
Yeah, it feels like a necessity on two fronts. Like, on the entertainment front, it's of course going to be extremely challenging to be focused on only two characters. I mean, this season pulled it off, primarily focusing on one.
I think that, not to interrupt, but I just think that you're right, it did. But I also think you're right in that they can't continue to do that for 4 seasons.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I think on the second, just if you just look at it within the story of the show, it's hard to imagine how far Manusos and Carol can get, just the two of them. I mean, going back to what I said earlier, if we wanted to do your Faraday cage experiment, how can they possibly do that now? If they ever get close to the Hive, they're just going to evacuate whatever city they're in. And so I feel like they may be forced to attempt to work with some of the other unjoined. And in the first place, my mind always goes is Kumba, who's been an entertaining character.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe would be self-interested. Yeah, if he felt like threatened that they were going to somehow get his stem cells. And I think you can make a case if they're able to get it from Carol's frozen eggs, depending on where you want to go with science. You could say it'll take longer, but they'll eventually find a way with Kumba. So you could probably appeal to that part of him.
He's not been shy about spreading his seed.
No, as everyone's quick to point out anytime you bring up, when you bring this up. Yeah.
And somehow I've never I've heard people say that so many times that I've never actually Googled it myself. Like, can you do what you can do with eggs to produce stem cells from sperm?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I've seen some scientists or self-described scientists on Reddit talk about what's possible and what's not, and I inevitably walk away convinced. I'm like, there's no way it could be done. And then I read somebody else's post, and I'm like, oh, okay, it can definitely be done. I feel like there's enough wiggle room in the science that they can, especially when they said how they're pulling it off with Carol. They're like, it takes time and a little bit of guesswork. I feel like that phrase, guesswork, gives you enough wiggle room to say, okay, they're doing something we don't fully understand with the science to make this work, and you buy it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It just has to be. You just have to be able to buy it. It doesn't have to be true or correct. It just has to seem plausible.
Right.
That's the threshold. And like I said, if everything else is working good, then you're willing to give it. You're willing to give it that suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, you'll meet it halfway.
Yeah. If it's not, then it's just not. It's not you're gonna get annoyed because you're gonna be like, this is so unbelievable. I can't stand it. This is the scene I keep going back to in my mind when I think about Kumba's return, Mr. Diabate.
Right.
The way he copied her eating the sandwich. It was a really great human moment, but it wasn't necessary for anything of what was going on. It just sort of tempered how dismissive he was of her, and he wanted, obviously for her to leave because she was the whole rest of the hive evacuated the city while she was there. So it was like, do I want these people that are going to give me everything I want all the time? Or do I want this one upset person that is kind of having a hard time? You know what I mean? Like, and he wasn't a dick, but he was like, please go.
Yeah, that has to be one of my favorite moments of the season. That's one thing that's easy to gloss over when you talk about why you like this show. It's also a hilarious show. I mean, from the first episode, Carol talking to the agriculture guy behind the lectern on TV, that's one of the funniest scenes. And it's such a great I remember early on, I saw some of the critiques were like, what's so groundbreaking about this? We've seen the hive mind. And I'm like, I've never seen that. Yeah, we are not aliens. I've never seen that. They took a trope we've seen before and put such a humorous and clever twist on it. But this moment here where she's like, I figured I'll find another sweet, get washed up, and then we can talk some more. And then that awkward beat. And then she's like, I'm kidding, of course. It's such a great moment.
Can't wait to get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and that's where you can talk about the pacing, where you don't want to just jump right into that awkward moment. You have them making the sandwich, and then that awkward moment lands in such a real way by the time you get there. I also thought it was fun watching him sort of mimic the way Carol was making her breakfast. When Carol,
that's what I'm saying,
all the way up to this point in the season, Carol is accused again and again of being unwilling to listen to anybody else. She walked into that room in season 2 on Air Force One, and she opened the floor for others to talk, but she really was there to just make her point and assumed everybody was on the same page as her. And yet, Kumba here is willing to learn from her and how to make a particular breakfast sandwich. So even there's a little bit of a character moment.
Yeah, and it's also his reconnection with humanity, because he's living in a fantasy. Like, he's in the same way that Kusamayu was just having them play act around her, her whole existence, so that she would be comfortable and feel like she was still a part of the village. That's what he has. And I feel like that's similar to how whenever Carol or to Zosha and the hive get excited about not knowing that Carol loved train whistles and getting new pages of Waikaro. Yeah, because that's the part of humanity that you can't replicate. You know what I mean? Like, that you can't play act through. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that's real. So he's like, I never thought, how many times have I had breakfast? I never thought of eating it that way. I'm going to try that myself. I'm like, not bad. Maybe I'll do that in the future. That's why you hang out with people. You learn other things. You know what I mean? You see the world, you get to learn how they see the world, and it improves the way that you do. You know what I mean? That's something that you do unequivocally lose in the Hive, right? Is that if everybody knows everything, if everyone loves everything, then none of that really does matter.
And I think you see something similar when Carol first invites Zosha over early in the season to just talk. And you think about how two, quote unquote, normal people talk to each other. It's like, what have you been up to lately? What's the best thing
She
you've seen
just
on TV
basically
recently?
does the Wikipedia thing.
Fun fact, which I love the fact that they brought that back in the ski lodge in the final episode, because while Carol's living in this fantasy of I'm in love with Zosha, she's still doing the Wikipedia fun fact thing. And to me, that was a crack in the facade. That was one thing which showed me that even if the other shoe didn't drop, where you find out they're working on the eggs, even if that hadn't happened, I think eventually the fantasy would have broken down.
Yeah. I love that. I would love to have, I mean, if if there was no choice, if that was just what was happening in the world, I would love to have a Zosha that would stop by and just tell me everything I wanted to know about something, rather than having to look that up on Wikipedia myself.
What was really at Area 51? Who shot Jay? All the stuff people say online. Like, this is what I would ask the Hive.
Yeah. Do you have a thing that you would ask the Hive?
Well, it's tough because the thing I'm most interested in is, what do we know about aliens? And I feel like, look around you, the answer is pretty obvious at this point. So, yeah, honestly, I would ask them, like, what do I not know to ask? What are the weirdest things the government covered up that I would be shocked to know?
It's sort of like the paradoxical kind of thing. Like, if a genie asks you gives you 3 wishes, like, can I have unlimited wishes? I would try to think of something to break the convention for sure.
Yeah. No, see, I would be what's the word? I don't know why I keep forgetting this word. When you do something that's good for somebody else that has nothing to do with we were talking altruism. See, that's what I would do.
Yeah.
My first wish would be, I wish you were free and didn't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Is what I'm going to say here, just to get points on the internet.
You're a good guy, Gil. Don't let anybody say
that's what I was waiting for. Thank you.
I'm trying to look through I'm trying to keep up with what people are saying here. I saw this one, and I can't find it when I scroll back here.
That's how active the chat is. It's hard to pick out.
Yeah.
Oh, going off what we were saying before, while you look for that, one great trick this season pulled off is the way that Kumba spoke to Carol earlier in the season. We see Carol speaking almost the same way at the end of the season to Manusos. So where Manusos kind of scoffed at Carol driving around in that police car, she's like, interesting choice of vehicle. And then later, when Carol sees Manusos is driving in an ambulance, she's like, that's what he's driving in? Or Lakshmi said to Carol, you haven't asked them what it's like. You're not asking any questions.
Yeah.
And then she says that.
Why don't you just talk to them?
Yeah, she says it in the final episode. So, like, the biggest trick the season pulled off is getting Carol to a place in the final episode that seemed impossible for her to be at the start of the season.
Yeah, and I love the way that a lot of what Carol wants is on offer, but it's always not like that, right? One of the things that I was reminded of when I was looking through the stills from episode 1, which, man, I haven't rewatched episode 1 since episode 1 was on. Like, I watched it several times in the week leading up to making the video about it and the stream we did, but I haven't watched it since. And I was struck by how just, man, they really did leave it all out on the field for that premiere. But but I was thinking, I saw these screenshots that were, what I thought this was the big moment in the first episode, her, after Helen's death, somebody please help me. And then the responses the hive, the first time that she's experienced the hive, saying, we just want to help Carol. And it's like, no, please, no, not like that, you know? So going back to what you were saying about the Lakshmi stuff, she said, you know, she says, why don't you just talk to them? So he goes and he does that right away. And she's like, no, you not to her, not like that. You know what I mean? Don't talk to Zosha, talk to any, they're all the same, but not to the one that I like, you know?
And it's such an aggressive way. And I love when he learns that you can set them off by angrily yelling at them. He's not even using any words. It's just literally him shouting in their face.
There's no pretense. It's just like,
it's the most
okay, get ready.
way
I'm
to
going
do it.
I'm going to make you guys all C's now.
You know, I wish I could watch that first episode having been completely blind to what the show is about, but I feel like having an inkling going in, I actually didn't watch any of the trailers except for like the 6-second teaser where you see the lady licking the donuts, then you see that smiley face, and we heard Vince's pitch, you know, the most miserable person on earth trying to save the world from happiness. You kind of put the pieces together and get the idea that it's a hive mind. So I feel like I couldn't get the proper visceral. I loved that first episode, but just that screenshot you showed where she's yelling, somebody please help me, and they all answer in unison. It almost didn't feel super creepy to me because from the beginning, I didn't see them as malevolent. I kind of assumed it was going to be this content glue that's holding them all together. The first time it genuinely felt creepy to me would be in episode 4, the Please Carol thing. That was the first time they walked toward her in unison, and it actually felt threatening. But I mean, I did love the opening, the first episode, but I also just so enjoy the element of surprise, and it would have been so cool to just know nothing about it going in. It would have been shocking to watch.
Yeah, I actually got to live vicariously through my wife, who didn't know anything about the premise or anything else. I was just like, I got this new show I'm covering, I'm super excited about it, you want to check it out? And seeing her reaction to like the swab scene where they all come in, like she has no clue that there might be a hive mind, that there, you know, the world might be changing in this way. And just seeing like her reaction to those scenes of like putting it together, like, wait, they're all moving in unison, like what's going on here? And when they all say hello Carol, you know, together for the first time, it was, I was a little jealous watching it, I'll be honest.
My girlfriend was peeking over my shoulder while I was watching, and so she had no idea what the show was about at the time. And she kept glancing over, and she's like, what the hell is this show? She's like, are they robots? Like, what is this? And I was like, I'm not going to tell you. And then she saw the moment where Carol holds up the cover of her book and looks at Zosha and realizes that they picked someone who looks like Raban. My girlfriend was like, don't tell me this is like one of those shows where she got sucked into her own book or something. And I was like, no. The funny thing is, I have seen that theorized online. Some people think this is her. What we're watching is her serious novel that she wanted to write, and once she finishes it, that's how she escapes this fantasy or whatever she's trapped in.
It's a cool idea, but it's not necessary. Like it's just, we don't need all that extra stuff. It's already just the world being turned into a hive mind of happy people is like really
it's
enough.
A fascinating show. I don't know that it becomes more interesting to say, you know how it's all fictional because it's a TV show, but it's really fictional within another fiction.
It's funny. This is something that we can bring up. I don't know how much you looked into the signal and stuff like that. I looked into it quite a bit, based on the books that he had on his desk in the finale. And basically what I decided was that it's a bunch of stuff that I could look up, and I understand basically what he was looking at, but like it's not really stuff that I should try to explain to anyone, if that makes sense.
It does.
Because I have no expertise, and I think it's more important to get the general idea of what he's doing than the details, because the details, if you get them wrong, that could actually, you know, mess up your experience of what you're watching. So Vegan Dilemma, thank you for the $10. Is the signal broadcast over 8613 a broadcast or comms channel? If broadcast, how and when would it have been created? Was there something being broadcast before patient 0? Okay, so never once in my life used a ham radio. Never broadcast a signal. Never listened to a signal through an amateur.
That Minusos introduction where he's like checking one frequency at a time in an egg timer, that's kind of how I pictured you when I'm not talking to you on streams. I guess that's not the case, you're saying.
Yeah, that's a reality that I never, that's a path I never followed. Maybe there was a chance that it could have happened, but it did not.
Yeah, life could have gone this way, but it went that way. It happens.
Yeah. So I don't really know the answer to this question, if I'm being honest, about the broadcaster. I feel like
really all we have to know about that frequency right now is that it makes a repeating pattern. Minusos he got angry at the hive, and when they were in convulsions, the signal reacted to that. I feel like that's kind of all we know. So the general theory that most people have is that what you're listening to is what is the sound produced by the glue that's holding them together. I don't know that you necessarily say you're listening to all the ideas that are transferring between people's minds.
I don't think, because I don't think that would actually work. Like a radio signal does not have the bandwidth of something like that, right? Because we have our telephones, they transfer a lot of information in what feels like real time, anywhere, all the time. You know what I mean? But this specific radio, that's not the same. And so therefore, there was a choice to make this a radio frequency, but I don't understand why they did that. So I feel like it limits it in a way. And I think what you're saying is that I think it would probably limit it in the sense that we would be able to understand that's how they're synced together, or that's a reflection of what, because I think what you said is true, that's what we know about it. But we also know we also have a few other details that haven't really been explained, which are and this goes sort of to what his question says. We know that the cell phone network was knocked out right away. That's one of the first things they did. That's not something that just happened. I feel like that's the implication is that they shut that down.
The one theory I've heard is that they don't need a cell phone network. It's similar to how they turn off all the lights at night.
But they didn't turn off all the lights until much later. They did the cell phone.
That's true. And that happened right away.
Within the first half an hour of the mass spreading, they had shut that down.
Yeah, that's true. And in my initial reaction to that was, I wonder if that somehow the cell signals would interfere with whatever is allowing them to communicate.
That's what I would think. Mm-hmm. I would think that's why the detail was included, right? Like they'll take any call from her anytime or any of the other unjoined, but only on landlines.
Right.
And they never, they could have introduced the idea of her saying, well, I want the internet. I want to be able to look at my phone and look something up. They would have included that plot point if they wanted us to know more about that right now.
Yeah, because if she asked for that and they said, we can't do that, that would be really putting a button on.
That's a normal thing a person would ask, right? I would ask for that almost immediately. I'd be like, why can't I look up stuff on my laptop?
Right. Yeah. Or I want to stream. I mean, I don't have my Golden Girls DVD. I lost it 20 years ago. So can I stream Golden Girls? What network is it on? Yeah.
Yeah. That's those are the things that a person would ask. Right. So I think that the fact that they didn't introduce that, because she was doing an investigation. So the internet is great for investigations.
Yeah.
Compared to just sitting in your room by yourself and thinking of ways that you can ask questions to the hive to get them to give up some information or whatever. So I guess to answer this, if it's broadcast, how and when would it have been created? I feel like this is something that they did right in the beginning, but I don't have an explanation for how that's possible. As far as what he was looking at things a pretty wide variety of things. But there was a book on crystallography, which made me think that he's building something like either a detector or a jammer or something, because that otherwise that book didn't really fit into the thing. And he was looking at sine waves and the one particular chapter or the one particular thing that, like, block of text that they show,
where he looked up the word loop, right?
Yeah, he was looking at loops, and he was looking at like nodes and anti-nodes, which would be possible in my layman's understanding, would be possible places where you could possibly disrupt the signal.
Like you would send out almost the opposite wave, so it would kind of cancel out and become neutral. Again, layman's terms, but somehow jam the signal or blank it out, or at least interfere with it in a certain area.
So I don't think that there was something. This last part of this question is interesting, because I would say no, I don't think there was something being broadcast before patient zero. But now that you bring it up, maybe there was. Maybe that was there. Maybe that was part of the ingredient. Maybe that was a necessary ingredient to getting them all to be psychically glued together. And that's why they shut down the cell networks right away, was because they wanted that to be the only signal that was being broadcast.
Yeah. My assumption has just been that they had the comment about how the human body has an electromagnetic field, and it's essentially been directed in a way by this RNA virus. And it's like a radio signal, so it bleeds into the 8613 frequency. That was my initial interpretation. But when you bring up these questions about how weak a radio signal it would actually be if it's produced by the human body, maybe that's not the actual communication, but it's just the thing that keeps them synchronized to the greater whole. Almost, you can think of it like a cloud, like cloud computing. There's the cloud, and this radio signal is them synchronizing to it. Something, I don't know how. When you start to use these terms, you can imagine a way this gets overly complicated, more than necessary for the show. So I don't know how much we'll get into the actual logistics, other than very vaguely, that is the signal produced by them connecting with each other. But I'm very curious to see. Yeah.
And the stack of books, I mean, like for me, that the subject matter is important, but it also is a signal for me as a Gilligan fan, is like, we're going to be watching some him putting together some machine next. There's going to be some long Mike Ehrmantraut stuff going on, like where he's going to be putting some stuff together to do this thing, and we're going to be wondering, what is that? Like, what is he trying to accomplish?
And maybe it'll be a flash forward where you see him picking up one component and another, and then by the end of the season, you see that's what they were building.
Yeah, it's sort of like the shoes on the line and Better Call Saul. It's like, why is he practicing throwing tennis shoes over the phone line or whatever?
Right.
So that is interesting though. I haven't really thought about the origin of the signal. I just thought that they wanted us to think this is something they did right away. This is one of their first steps, was shutting down cell towers, so that frequency is kind of necessary to them functioning as a unified hive with everyone in sync. It would be kind of fun if they could maybe not just separate, but also desync. Desyncing might be kind of fun. Like if like all the high people in a certain region were suddenly desynced, and so they started to have competing things that they were trying to do.
We'll have like two hives on Earth now.
Yeah.
I mean, I am curious, so we've seen like two strange global behaviors. We've seen the convulsing when they're yelled at, and we've seen the please, Carol. Are we going to see a third thing next season, a third strange global phenomenon? I have no prediction for what that would be, but it's one thing I wonder about.
Well, yeah, that's usually a good, like, things usually happen in threes, right?
Yeah, that's what they say, right? Especially though, I feel like Vince Gilligan didn't get the memo because they played that "Hello, Carol, our feelings for you haven't changed. They played that more than 3 times.
You know that it's Lalo's voice that whenever they call Manusos, right?
Yeah, in the final episode, I did not recognize it, but
I didn't
when I read it
recognize it
afterward,
either.
I went back. I was like,
missed it.
the Howard Hamlin one I did recognize.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's
Lalo,
because
once
I don't
was told
speak
it.
Spanish fluently, so I was reading the subtitles rather than listening to the actual voice. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, you're distracted by that. But when I went back to listen again, I was like,
I would
yeah,
imagine
hear it.
everyone who speaks Spanish fluently knew that was Lalo right away. But in the same way we knew it was Howard. I guess I didn't know it was Howard right away. Like they had to repeat it enough for me to be 100% sure. Like I thought it was. I was like, first it sounded familiar, then it was like, now when you listen to it, you can't hear, like it's so obvious, painfully obvious.
Have you thought
like,
about that job offer, Jimmy?
Yeah. But that, like you said, the show is funny. And one of the things that they get to do, like, you know, that they get to do because they've had success is they get to just have that Howard, like there's no new TV show that came out would be able to play that Howard Hamlin thing. Like the producers would have stepped in and been like, look, we get it. It was a gag. It was funny. Like
enough
2 episodes earlier, but you can't just keep doing this. You know, I feel like there's no one that can say that to them in this writer's room now.
The fun thing is I get like a second layer of enjoyment from it now because I have a spiteful side. I don't indulge it very often, but I don't know if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, but there's a season where someone makes a comment about like, you know, getting these coffee beans for my restaurant. It's very difficult to do. And then Larry opens up a spite cafe. He calls it like a spite restaurant where he does it just to prove that he can get the coffee beans. So now that I know, I'm loving Pluribus, and now that I know there's a contingent of people that are like, it's so slow. Every time that they play that voicemail recording, I get a second laugh where I'm like, I know this is torturing people that are like, will you get on with the story, please?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, there's a fine line with indulgences. If they're funny, then I like them more. But like one of those things when it comes to TV that sometimes I have to try to think past, like in my own experience of it, is like just so that I can do what I do, I guess, as far as like, you know, making recaps or whatever. A lot of times if I can put myself in the thought process of what they're doing, a lot of times, even if something's bad, I can still kind of enjoy that, you know what I mean? Like that process, like, okay, well, I understand why they did this. So if I understand why they did something, like it kind of just from a creative point of view, like it still can be satisfying because like, I don't know if people know, but sometimes you have great ideas and then you try to make them into something and it turns out to be terrible. You know what I mean? And sometimes you have ideas that you think are just kind of whatever. And then once you start to develop it, it turns into something that much more than what it initially was. So everything is process based when it comes to this. And so sometimes whenever I can relate to the process and to the, like making the choices that they made make sense to me, then I can kind of enjoy it, even if it's not exactly enjoyable to watch or whatever.
Yeah, it almost becomes intellectually satisfying.
Yeah, that's
it gives you it's like normally you engage with a story because I'm entertained by it. I'm curious to know
I want
where
to
it's
feel
going.
something. I want to have an emotional reaction to something.
Exactly. But then absent that, the thing you can always fall back on is the intellectualizing of, okay, why did they make that choice? Or why is it not working for me, but it seems to be working for some other people, you know, et cetera. And what you said about process, it's one way to really appreciate that is to read the screenplay for a movie that you either like or don't like, and just seeing how what was on the page translated to screen. One movie I loved last year was 28 Years Later, and they actually sold a copy of the screenplay, and you can see a lot of things that were explicitly changed from the page before it got to screen, where I'm like, that's a definite improvement, because I read that page and I'm like, that kind of feels stupid. But then in the movie, it's great, and you can see a few things they changed. Then there were a couple of things where I'm like, on the page, it really sounds cheesy or it doesn't work. And then I go back and watch the scene, and I'm like, it's word for word what's on the page. Yeah. But the way it was executed with the actor, the way I'm like, it actually works. So it's not, it's, you know, sometimes you'll watch a movie and you're like, how did this get greenlit? How did nobody catch this before they shot it? And it's not always easy to tell page versus what actually ends up on screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny like that you say it like that, because that's not how we interact. And so when you think about it, is that successful or not, you know? And I guess that's why I was saying I had to sort of take my own intellectualizing out of it sometimes, because if that's not the norm, if that's not what everyone's doing, then it's not really relevant. It's just how I experience the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Albert 2691, thank you for the 5. This is a little bit. All right, so discuss how Zosha did not consent to her affair with Carol. Seems like sexual assault to me, which is yeah. Also, when and if Zosha dehives, how will that play out? So yeah, this is something that, you know, the show is obviously concerned with the idea of consent. And one of the things about the hive is that the initial joining was not consensual. And they showed that on screen. They showed that the kissing between at the lab, right? Like that was straight up just walking up to an unsuspecting person, kissing them without any kind of saying anything about it, and then spreading the virus that way. So that's where it starts, right? Then, you know, there was this idea whenever Diabate's episode came out where he's kind of a likable character. He's enjoyable to watch. His fantasy his choice of fantasy is ridiculous, and you would think that you wouldn't do that if you were in that situation, but it's also kind of relatable. And I don't know, like if you were a teenager, you might definitely be thinking like that's living the life, right? So like yeah, so then the idea of consent came into that conversation of like, well, he's really just a creepy rapist who is doing that. And I don't know, like I didn't really get on board with it there. I felt like that's, I mean, I feel like, yeah, if you look at it black and white, then yeah, that is, you know what I mean? Like those people that are those individual bodies that he's using in that situation, the individuals who were connected to them initially can no longer consent to that.
Yeah.
As far as we understand it.
Right. Yeah. If you take the basic moral question of, I mean, it's not even a question. Like, obviously, it is wrong to take a person's body and puppet it to do things that they cannot possibly consent to. And though I think this show is sort of doing what a lot of apocalyptic tales do, which is that when the world gets really screwed up, people start to do bad things that they wouldn't have done otherwise. In addition to, I mean, I think that's more Carol's situation than Kumba's, where she went through the 40 days of essentially psychological torture. But then it's also what's put in front of her and how that changes the way that she thinks. When somebody is speaking to you, it's very hard to interpret them as something other than an individual. Right? Even when we're talking about the show, we have to remind ourselves Zosha is not a character for all intents and purposes. She's a mouthpiece for the hive mind. So I think you're just seeing all the weird stuff, the apocalyptic scenario, the psychological torture, the fantastical reality they're in that the human brain is not built to process, can lead to immoral and morally shocking behavior, even though on a basic level, it's obviously wrong, especially once we realize there is a way to reverse all this. So the assumption is that the individuals are still intact. And like he even asks here, what happens when she quote unquote dehives? Now, I imagine by the time we get to that point, if we get to that point, so much has happened. It's just so you can't even wrap your head around what that's going to be. But
that's sort of that's sort of what I was thinking about it whenever the Diabate thing came up, because I thought that the intention with the character was not to show him as a creepy, weirdo. It was more to show someone who had never experienced those kinds of things, like just having the filter off and being like, I'm, going wild with it. Like he was the opposite of Carol, right? Carol was like, I don't want any of it. Then we meet Manussos and he was like, I definitely don't want to even speak to these people. So that was a different reaction. But I didn't think that they were trying to make a point that while, humanity is, especially a guy in this situation would just, do all this terrible stuff because he can. And that's why, that's why humans suck or whatever, because that would be the story that they're telling. Right. Like, and so like, yeah, there's no doubt. Like if you think about like date rape drugs or whatever, right? So if you give someone a drug so they don't know what's going on and then you have sex with them, of course, that is like one of the most shocking crimes and just lack of like just examples of lack of humanity. You know what I mean? Like this just, it's just sort of like, how could you do that and enjoy that? Like it's very hard to even imagine, right? Like obviously you understand how, sex is fun and you do it because it's fun, just for fun sometimes. But like, if the other person has to be coerced in such a way that like, to me, that's just sort of like, well, okay, that wouldn't be fun anymore. Right. Like, like the physical pleasure doesn't pay off the fact that my brain would be thinking about like what this other human is being inflicted with. Right. So like, when I think about the Diabate situation, I don't feel like they're saying, like, it doesn't feel like date rape to me. Like,
or at least they're not pointing the camera or the writing at that fact. It's something that you think about, but if they were making that explicit, I think it would be harder to buy what Diabate is doing, right? Those scenes would almost be impossible to put on the screen. But the whole point is that he's indulging in a fantasy and that the hive is only doing whatever they need to do to please him. And so he's living in that fantasy. And then there's that dark underpinning of the lack of consent. But yeah, to your point, they're not highlighting that. Because and they would, considering how the hive functions.
Because they also have the scene where he asks her directly if he's being untoward, whenever he's saying he wants Zosha to come along with him, when he's asking Carol if it's okay if he takes her what do they call them? Chaperones, right?
Right.
And the way the hive it says, is like, we enjoy pleasure, so of course it's okay with us, right? So he's just saying, okay, well, I'll believe him if that's what they say, right? And they can't lie. So there is at least the hive, not the individuals that are trapped inside of it, doesn't have an issue with it, right? So I think that just works to set up it being more, this situation was those should be more interesting with Carol, because Carol believes that what he's doing is wrong. So therefore, when she's doing it with Zosha, there's a part of her that believes that what she's doing is wrong too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like that's the emotional beat for the character. It's not the idea of consent as far as what because we don't really understand what it's like to be inside the hive, right? So we don't really understand how those individuals will process that or what it'll be like if they get out. It's not like they guaranteed have amnesia and they won't have any memory, but they might not, we just don't know. Mm-hmm. But as far as like the emotional beat is like, Carol knows that's wrong, but yet she was so isolated that she was still like, I'm going to try it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do this. And so therefore she feels bad about it. It's not like it doesn't matter to her. It's not like, so I felt like that was more of the character focus, you know what I mean?
And you can see her at least hinting at that quandary in her mind when she asks, Zosha, the individual, did she have someone? And she's at least asking that question. So you can see it's on her mind.
Yeah, and she does it in a way that it also limits her exposure too, right? And she doesn't use pronouns. She doesn't delve into things that might be uncomfortable for her because she's coping, right? Like this is the whole relationship is a coping mechanism.
Yeah. It's similar to Lakshmi saying, "This is my son," despite all the evidence to the contrary. And now I think Carol's doing that for herself, essentially lying to herself.
Yeah, because it's it's easy to have like it's easy to say, well, it's easy to use that as a way to say Carol's a bad person. You know what I mean? But I don't think that that's what they're trying to do. I think what they're trying to do is like say, look, what if everything that you understood was turned upside down and you were stuck in the middle of it? How would you react?
Right.
And for most of the season, she reacted in ways that were quite logical and relatable and kind of, you know, personality wise, people might not have enjoyed some aspects of that, but like the actual thing was she, compared to the other immune, she was actually the one person who was, as far as prioritizing individuality, she was the one person that was on our side.
Mm-hmm.
Threxus, thank you for the 10. If the hive can't harm any life, then how are they going to square working with Carol's eggs? Are they going to grow a baby because they can't stop it? Apologies if this was already asked. Love the chant. Thank you. I don't know that we have. When Courtney was on, she looked up the process of creating the pluripotent cells and she explained it, and she did such a good job that I'd never really went back and looked it up again.
I just nodded like, yeah, sounds good. All right, next.
Like she got me over the line to where I was like, yeah, they can do that. That's that's how much I needed to know about that.
Right.
It did not involve making babies.
Yeah, that was my impression as well. I don't think they need to grow a baby, but even if they did, I'm not even sure what the issue would be. They would take care of the baby. If it was joined, okay, then we've got another member of our hive. If it was unjoined, well, it'd be interesting to see how that kid turns out being raised by a hive mind, what its understanding of humanity would be.
Yeah, I don't think that they would discard the baby. I don't think there's anything that I've seen that would make that a concern.
It seems like obviously they can't harm any living things, but would they take a child and, well, we're not harming it, but we're not taking care of it? That also doesn't.
Oh, maybe they're talking about in the sense that like how they can't harvest the stem cells because of it's an invasive procedure. Maybe the Thraxus is asking about how would they use the baby after they did that. My thinking is that they don't even need to go that far. They just need to induce a chemical process that would start to produce stem cells, and then they could harvest them that way. But I guess that could be tricky if if the baby was a baby and not just biological material that they could obtain through windfall, then they would be kind of their hands would be a little bit tied, right?
Yeah, I think it would be hypothetically, but I think they're in the, I guess, fortunate for them scenario where they're able to gather those stem cells without harming life or violating any of their rules.
Yeah,
I see what he's asking. Okay, so he's saying because they can potentially make life, but it just seems like their rules are very stringently literal. So they don't say we can't harm potential life or prevent life from forming. They just say we cannot harm living things. So whether you agree with their definitions or not, it seems like that's the way they're thinking about it.
Yeah, that's what I would say too. I don't think there's a plot hole or something like that there. If they need to explain that, then I imagine they will. But right now, I think that's what they're going for, is that they can bend the rules when they need to, and I don't think that they're malicious. Like, I don't think that would be a part of it. So that would just be the one thing that I would say. But they are absolutely compelled to turn Carol and everyone else into a member of the hive.
Yes. And not even just Carol, but not even just the rest of the humans, but they even want to beam the signal out there into space. So it's no longer just humanity Carol's trying to free from the hive, but all the future species that the signal might reach. She's trying to save the galaxy at this point.
Yeah, this is another thing that I've seen quite a bit. Angela Law is saying here, could the fetuses, babies, or prepubescent children have the ability to survive the joining? I've seen a lot of people asking questions about the kids. What's that?
Yeah. Well, we saw a child. I know people have asked, where are the children?
Yeah, the kid was working in the hospital like an adult.
Yeah, I always assume that they're going to take whatever bodies are best for the job. And most of the jobs we've seen have been some form of manual labor, restocking the, I forget the name of the grocery store.
Bring child labor back again.
Building Carol's house back up. So those are just not jobs that are best suited for children. But I guess pushing a cart at the hospital, a kid could do that. So we haven't seen, and we also saw the two kids that told Carol where to find her keys when she was trying to get back in the house in episode 1. So they're there, and so clearly they can survive. I think they're just not fit for a lot of these jobs. I guess the one thing I'd have to look back at is when we see them going to sleep in that stadium. Or that convention center. I can't recall if I saw kids there or if it was all adults. Wouldn't be a definitive answer, but it would be interesting at least.
There were not children there as far as I remember, but I think that's more of a filming with kids issue.
That's true. You know there's a lot of limit. You can't film at night. Things like I know. Like I don't know. I keep going back to this movie because I guess I thought about it a lot. But 28 years later, there's a scene where they're like running. Well, first they had to use a lot of prosthetic genitals because they're shooting around a child. It's like we can't have naked adults around. And there's one scene where they're running across a causeway at night. And I think that was actually shot during the day in an interior. And part of that is, well, it needs to look like night, but shooting at night with children is very difficult. So there's a lot of filming logistics that comes into it.
Yeah. This guy says that I sound like the most boring white person to ever exist.
Okay.
Cool, bro.
Well, kudos to you for pulling the comment on screen. I'm usually very, I have a pretty strong filter for the stuff I'm willing to acknowledge in the chat. Then some people get very angry. They're like, what's the point of this conversation if you're just going to ignore us? I'm like, well, if it's a quality comment, if it's a good enough one to get through the filter, we'll respond to it. It'll get on screen.
Yeah. I mean, thanks, dude. I mean, I don't know what, like, go somewhere else. There's a solution to your problem that's available to you right now.
Yeah, unlike The Joining, this is not a forced procedure. You can leave if you want to. Yeah, this show has brought out, I'll say when we were covering Better Call Saul, it gave me a very false idea, false impression of the internet, because it was all love. I think people were so desperate to talk about that show because it was that perfect mix of, it's a show a lot of people really liked, but like you said before, it didn't break into the mainstream the same way Breaking Bad did. So there's all these people itching to talk about it. So when we had, my brothers and I would do these live streams, it was just all good vibes and good feelings. Pluribus, it's been such a polarizing show that if I were the hive mind, we would just be in constant convulsions because the amount of anger that's been directed at us, it's been strange, a very polarizing show. It's brought out the crazies.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like that's one thing that I know that I remember, Gil, when we first met, we did before we did any of that stuff, we did a call and we were talking about comments, and that was one of the things that came up when we talked. It's just like, man, you can hear so many good ones. Like ever since I put that up, a lot of people put good comments in there, right? And it's just so weird how you can get so many good ones, but that one salty one that it can just still ruin your day and get on your nerves,
Yeah, I really had to train that out of me because I have such a debate brain. Like when I hear something, like if I'm watching TV and somebody says something I disagree with, like I want to respond to it. And because I can't respond, I just go over it in my head again and again. And I keep reformulating what would I have said in that situation? Yeah. So in the early days of YouTube, before your skin has to grow as thick as Iron Man when you're doing YouTube.
It really does.
But in the early days, it was just a constant in my head, just formulating all these angry responses I wanted to have. But you're just feeding them. You're feeding the trolls, you can't do it. But you get better about it. But every once in a while, that one will come through that just stings just right, and then a week later, all these great comments, all these nice things, and that one just sticks in your brain.
Yeah, it's just funny because I've talked to so many creators, and they all say the same thing. It's like sometimes you just don't want to look at them at all. Like you want to engage with people, but like it's so low effort to just insult someone that it's so easy that you can do it on scale, and so it's like. It doesn't matter, like a voice on the internet doesn't matter really, but like getting insulted is this, it's always the same.
I remember I had one guy came into one of my comments and was like, "This video was boring. I will now dislike all of your videos." And I had like 100 videos at the time, and I'm looking and I'm like, I see dislike went up one, and I'm like, that guy, like the time he took out of his day to do that. It's funny.
Yeah, it is funny. Now that we're getting towards the 2-hour mark here, was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, I'm curious. When you were putting some of the notes together before we spoke, you had theories on there. Literally just one note that said theories, and I'm curious if you have any. Do you have any wild predictions for next season? I mean, I feel like it's a very difficult show to predict, like versus Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, where there was a very clear, we knew where we were going with both shows to some extent. So you can kind of rough out, what do I think is going to happen next? For this show, we have a couple of pointers with the radio signal. We have an atom bomb.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you have any gut reaction or any inkling of where you think we're going next.
I think that, I think that I'm one of those people, like I've said this many times, like I'm not a big tinfoil guy. Same. Like if I see a tinfoil when I'm scrolling or something, like sometimes I can get swept up into it, but I usually come back down to earth pretty quick. I don't usually stay on it. I do like seeing people crafting tinfoil and getting all excited about it, just because it's not something that I can do naturally. So I just sort of find it impressive in a way sometimes, but as far as like what I think is going to happen next, it sort of goes back to what I was saying about the process stuff and the Mike Ehrman trial. Like I think that part of season 2, I think a big part of season 2 will be freeing someone from the hive. So I think that he probably knows what he needs to know about the signal already, and that he needs to construct his device, that he's started to figure out what was going on while Carol was off, enjoying a romantic getaway around the world. Beyond that, I don't know. I think that Diabate will play a role. I think that I was thinking that he would maybe be separated. Like he was, like, I feel like there's diminishing returns on what's going on with him. Right. So he's not going to just keep going through his favorite films and having them act them out,
recreate all the scenes.
Yeah.
Ocean's
like
11
after
today.
a while, it's going to be like, are we going to do that again? Like, sooner or later you're going to lose interest. Right. So I think but what you said about him perhaps being the secret agent, because I also was thinking about the fact that they thought about Carol being a double agent in the original ending, and they sort of shelved that. I'm kind of expecting for someone else to be the double agent, and who else?
I had the
would
exact same thought. Yeah, I think they're going to give that to somebody else.
Diabate. So those are like my wild theories. They're not very wild, but like
so wild. One thing that they said they're going to do in an interview. So it's like, I think they're going to do that.
Yeah, I'm lame when it comes to that. Honestly.
No, I'm similar, because I'm scrolling through all the fan theories and I'm like, no way. Like, I disagree with every single theory I've seen.
Yeah.
So then I just imagine, okay, Gil, you're so smart. So what do you think they're going to do? And I'm like, well, it's the obvious thing, but so far the show has done the obvious thing, but just in a very interesting way. So the obvious thing is we're going to try and jam the signal or isolate someone from it. But of course, doing that is complicated. Perhaps it requires a double agent. It requires gathering items, which Carol might feel tempted to say, let's call Hamlin and leave a voicemail and he'll give it to us. Manusos might be against that. He's a little bit more open to interacting with the Hive now. By the end of the finale, he went from I'm not speaking to them at all to questioning them for a pretty decent amount of time. So I think that's where some of the tension is going to come from. So I have a feeling if we get to separating someone from the Hive, that's a monumental thing. Because as soon as you show you can do it with one person, it's just it becomes an engineering problem of, okay, how do we expand that globally, basically? And it almost undercuts the stakes of the show so much. So I feel like if that's going to happen, it's a season finale thing. So it might be a season of failures / process. It's just a complicated thing to do to pull off this experiment. The thing I keep going back to, though, is it's also so character driven. And the overall arc of season 1, it sort of was Carol initially wanting to save the world, losing hope, effectively giving up while still trying to an extent, but then really giving into the fantasy entirely. Then the shoe drops, they're going to get her stem cells, and she comes back. Okay, let's save the world. But the thing I have to remind myself is that that's not how humans work, where it's just you flip the switch, boom, I am now in the mindset of saving the world, and it's never going to change again. And people backslide the same way. They've referenced Carol's drinking a few times, and they reminded us of it in the finale when they had that little device on the cabinet that Helen installed there. The same way you don't just give up drinking and like, that's it, I did it. Like, it's a constant struggle. So I have to remind myself, it's not the meme was always, and that's when he became Heisenberg. That's when he became Saul Goodman. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. No, he did something in that direction. It doesn't mean he's firmly there. Carol, that's the moment she became Pluribus. Like, not quite. But I don't want the show to get repetitive where it's like, again, she's deciding whether or not she wants to save the world. But there has to still be some struggle in her character. Is it going to continue to be that she's a reluctant hero and that reluctance keeps cropping back up? Is it going to be something else? But that's a little bit of a question mark to me right now, is what's next for Carol as a character?
Yeah, because I think that my assessment at the end was that season 1 was about her accepting the call, right, to save the world. And then if that was the case and it was a straight line, then it wouldn't take 4 seasons to do that. So generally then you run into struggles, right? The person, the hero has made that choice, but then that it's not easy to do that. And so that all seems to line up with what you're saying. I mean, I think a big part of it is going to be like what I said earlier, like, what if they get someone out of the Hive and they don't want to not be in the Hive, right? Because if we talked about consent a little bit ago, like, what do you do if that person's like, no, actually it is kind of great and I prefer it? Because that's what Zosha told her point blank whenever that came up in the hospital scene. Remember, she was like, we know what it's like to be you. We don't want that.
Right.
So,
and what if it's somehow irreversible? So now it's a choice of, well, okay, if we free everyone, it's not exactly fair. We can't ask them, because if we ask, they're going to say yes collectively. But if you separate them back into individuals, some might not want to be in there anymore and some do. What if
the cost on saving the world is that everyone remembers how much better it was to be in the Hive and are just pissed for the rest of their lives that Carol ruined it for them?
That's been my prediction since episode 1 or 2, I think, because I kept imagining, okay, if it were a Twilight Zone episode, isn't that how it would end? They free the Hive, but everyone is miserable now because they wish they were still part of it. And so Carol continues to be, she was the hero until the moment she freed them, and now she's the biggest villain in the world.
Yeah, that would isolate her in a way that she was more so than she was in the and like, what if Zosha is like, you're a rapist and how could you do that to my body while You know what I mean? Like there's a
Yeah,
lot
it
of
could be a
different things.
shockingly cynical and
It could
pessimistic
be,
ending. I have a
it's
feeling,
unlikely that it's not
yeah.
going to be, but you
Well,
know,
my image for the ending is that everything I just described, it's a miserable ending. Everyone's angry at Carol, but the final scene is we meet at least one person who's not angry at her, like a child that had dreams, maybe of being an author like her one day, and she's like,
uh,
"Thanks to you, Carol, I can actually pursue that." So we end on a bittersweet note. The whole world
yeah,
hates her, but actually there are some people that are glad to be out of the hive.
yeah. The lucky 50/50, thank you for the 10. If the virus has infected spread, as the virus has the infected spread the signal, then maybe whatever created the virus will come to Earth. Otherwise, why infect other species just to have them spread the signal and nothing else? Well, that's sort of like what a virus does. So that's just one thing, right? So so what you're asking is like, what is the intention or what is the point? And that could be a lot of different things. The one thing I go back to as far as being a sci-fi person and someone who's into sci-fi and reads a lot of sci-fi, I don't really like the pacification idea that was popular, that theory that it's sent ahead of the actual arrival of this other alien species that's going to then show up and be able to take the planet without a problem. That just I just don't see that as being a satisfying answer for this TV show.
It also just feels convoluted. Like it's a lot of extra steps to pacify a species. Like there's so
Yeah,
many ways to pacify a species, but you chose, let's create a hive mind where they
yeah.
can't harvest plants or kill animals, and therefore
Like it
they'll
would
starve
do
out within
that.
10 years. Yeah.
It would do that if what they said was true about losing, the caloric deficit taking over and all that and not being able to kill. Like all that does track. I'm not saying that it's not logical. It's not one of the logical explanations. It's just not one that I like. You know what I mean? So the other ones are that there is an advanced civilization who basically wants to pacify, in the sense that not that they're ever going to come here, but that they don't want other civilizations that are developing to bypass them or become threats in the future. So that makes a little more sense because of the fact that it's sent in an RNA sequence that is, you have to have you have to be able to build a radio telescope and listen for this kind of signal in order to be able to make the virus. So it requires you to reach a technological, like an advancement in your technology that you can do that. So it kind of makes sense to me. Like that seems like possible, maybe plausible or whatever, because there's the whole idea of the dark forest theory, right? Where if you're trying to communicate and whatever, then you open yourself up to these advanced civilizations that would just do better to wipe you out because resources are limited, even though it's on such a huge grand scale and the galactic scale or the universal scale or whatever. Like there still is only so much stuff to go around, and people in civilizations or whatever will continue to, generally speaking, fight over those things, right? So I think as far as like if we know the intention, I like that one, or if we ever were going to find out about the intention, I like that idea. And then I like the other idea of they were trying to do something else, something good even maybe, and something went wrong, and so this thing just got out of hand and it's just bouncing around the galaxy, self-replicating. You know what I mean?
That's sort of the theory that I vibe with the most, I think, because
That's what seems like tonally, that seems like it kind of matches what Pluribus is more.
Exactly, because if it feels like a virus that was designed, not something that just popped up in a weird split of evolution, because it has these explicit rules, don't harm any life. It makes everybody content. The way that it's all built in that that sort of altruistic way to kind of bring that word up again. And the way that the rules sound good at first, but then they have this weird, unpredictable result that you don't see right away. Don't harm anything. That sounds great until you realize it means the extinction of your species within a set amount of time. So
maybe they should have put a few caveats in there whenever they wrote that rule.
It feels like something that went wrong. It feels designed, and maybe it was out of desperation, and that's why it was able to go so wrong. Because one of the popular ideas in sci-fi is that why have we not seen any aliens? Right? Putting aside the obvious one if they're so far away, but one of them is that maybe every sentient species that's sufficiently advanced enough is essentially destined to destroy itself. We're going to build powerful weapons, we're going to sap our resources, whatever. So let's say there's some planet that's on the brink of global war that's going to guaranteed to destroy the planet, and some scientists in a last-ditch effort, okay, the only way for us all to get along is to really get along with a psychic glue. So we quickly design this thing, it gets out of hand, we're infected, and unpredictably, not only is it going to kill all of us, but that biological imperative to spread it means that before we all die, we're going to beam it to another planet, and they're going to beam it to another one. So it's just designed so perfectly or imperfectly that it just euthanizes sentient life throughout the galaxy.
Mm-hmm. Anybody that's ever played Stellaris knows that, because it's about building a civilization. Like when you cross the barrier into like faster than light travel, you know what I mean? So you discover all these different systems and planets, and some of the civilizations you encounter, you'll be observing them as they go through the stages, and if you just let them go, they always nuke themselves. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's so predictable. MJ323, thank you for the 5. As always, thanks for the discussion. Did you all take note or discuss that the A-bomb crate is basically a big sealable metal box? I never really. I figured that's probably how they actually store nuclear weapons, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, maybe the point is that, hey, how convenient. If you wanted to block radio signals, you stick somebody in that box.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
Yeah,
I don't think that if that would be something that happened as a happy accident, though. I don't think Carol asked for a nuclear bomb because she thought it was going to be in a Faraday cage, basically.
Right. If I ask for a Faraday cage, they're going to be like, no, we can use that against us. But if I ask for an A-bomb, that's okay. So it just so happens. Yeah.
I don't think that was front and center on her mind. You may be correct, though. That might be something they can do.
Even if she didn't intend it, it might come in handy that way.
Like, I think that will be another thing that'll be a big part of season 2 would be because like I said, we both are kind of in agreement that's going to be the process of them doing whatever they're trying to do. And so a part of that is scavenging the things that they need, because I don't expect that. I don't think the hive will be hostile. Like, I think it'll go down to that message, right? Their feelings for them haven't changed, but they need their space because Manusos showed that he's just going to put them in a coma whenever they're nearby. Right. So, or a seizure. I mean, so that they can't hang out.
I take them at their word also. I don't think they're angry. I don't think they're hostile toward Carol or Manusos, even to the point where after Manusos did his initial experiment, they defended him to Carol. Like, we want to tell you that he warned us before he did it, for what it's worth. I take them at their word that I think if they call up and ask for certain things, they'll give it to them.
I think I agree. I think that they don't want them. They're not trying to kill them. They're not hostile.
But they might refuse to outwardly assist them with building, for example. I think a Faraday cage, I think, is tough to stop because it's just like a sealed container, basically, that blocks radio signals. I think that's a simple enough request where it's like, how do we even stop them from doing that? They can get all the resources they need probably over there.
I guess that was the point I was making, that'll be that there's a lot of material in them going around and trying to to get that stuff themselves.
Right. Like, I don't
knowing
think
that knowing that they're being watched by drone at all times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. But I think there are things they'll want to be more clandestine about. I think Manusos will probably push for it more than Carol does. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mexi Man and Cheese, thank you for the 10. Maybe the signal was invented by a species that doesn't need to harm for caloric intake, photosynthesis. So they spread the signal without realizing who was genocidal for species they hadn't imagined. I like the way that you're thinking about that, but I don't know. I feel like because this is RNA based, like they almost sort of have to know something about, like, that's something that never really added up for me whenever I tried to, because I did a video about the joining. So I sort of put together everything that we knew about what was going on. And that was one of the points that was a little bit hard to justify, was it's specific to us. Like I you know what I mean? Like I couldn't find anything that said that it would be a good idea if you just randomly wanted to convert a wide variety of possibilities, you know what I mean? And so I think that this is kind of one of those things. I feel like it's a good idea that you have, but I doubt it's likely to be correct, because I think that's one part of the premise where they were like, yeah, well, you just have to sort of accept that they got the right virus to come here and do that. But we'll see. It's something to keep in mind.
Well, I wonder if we will see. Do you actually think, we've seen a few questions on that topic, do you think we'll ever get answers to these questions? Like, where did the virus actually originate from?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think we could, but I think that if we did, it would be because it makes sense for something else that they're trying to do. I think it's sort of like seeing the aliens, right?
Yeah, I just don't think it'll happen.
Yeah, like if you're reading a sci-fi book and the author doesn't include any details about the aliens, what do? You make it up in your imagination, right? As cool as you could think it would be, right? For the idea, for the situation. So if they would come around later and say, oh, this is what they're like, the chances are that's not really going to live up to the thing that you created in your head. And so it's going to be a letdown. So there's really no upside to doing that.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Zosha was somewhat talking to us in the second to last episode, I think.
Oh, yeah, they're far too far away, is what she said, right?
Yeah, she's like, we'll probably never learn the first thing about them. And I was like, got it. Okay, noted.
Yeah, that's the way I think about it, too. However, like the details of like why they're immune or how the virus got, what the original intention, like those things could fit in, but I just don't think that they're the point.
Yeah.
You know? So we'll just see. Jim Rodney 4797, thank you for the $9.99. I feel like most people are conflating the hive mind sync communication signal Manusos discovered with the virus itself. But blocking it or disrupting it does not cure someone of the actual virus. Yeah, I that's a very interesting distinction to make. If it is an RNA virus, and the way that it's explained, it rewires you, right? And so that goes back to what I was saying. We never really got into it any more than, like I said, I think it is what synchronizes them together. It is something about the psychic glue, but that is very different for like breaking them free from that is breaking them away from communication or being in sync with the other people. It is not undoing the virus.
Right. If you want to see what it looks like to separate someone from the hive, go back to patient 0 in episode 1. She wasn't glued to anybody because she was the only one infected. And she already had the biological imperative, was already walking around with a little contented grin on her face, and was acting the way that we understand the hive to act from the rest of the season. So to your point, Jim, I agree. I think blocking the signal does not cure them. It disconnects them. And that could be interesting. And it could be a step in the process of curing them. But as far as we understand, it doesn't get you all the way there.
And I guess the key part of this is one of the things that I think about is that the hive knows how to undo the joining. Carol, right. By not answering Carol, they pretty much confirmed that. So anyone who was separated may still retain that information. And so actually getting someone away from the hive might be more about how to undo it than actually undoing it.
Right. Put him in a Faraday cage and then try the truth serum experiment again. But this time there won't be a please carols that come.
Hopefully this time they won't die. If they do die, well, you can just go get another one because they're just hive members anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
You just call the hive and say, can you send me whoever was the worst person alive before the hive? Someone really should have been killed. And if
everyone knows an actual person they could request in that situation, right? Like
yeah, exactly.
Someone that lives on their floor or their block.
Yeah, Carol's like, remember that cousin you told me about? Send that cousin over. I want to try something.
Mm-hmm. Well, what were your theories?
Well, I think in terms of the general shape of the season, I think I've talked about it already, and we both agreed. I think we're both very similar. We're not tinfoil hat. Ironically, tinfoil hat might be important in this show to break the radio signal, but I think it's the general shape of the season is them building this thing. I'll essentially be repeating myself if I go through it all again. I just think it's going to be, I can't shake this feeling that it's going to be done with those flash forward things that they've used in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul to show us elements of what they're working on. And then it all comes together in the final episode. Only because if season 2 is going to focus more on a process than season 1. Season 1 was more about getting Carol to the place where she was willing to even try a process. Mystery, right? What's that?
It does need some mystery, right?
Exactly. And it needs to be interesting. They always do things in the most interesting way possible. So I think season 2 might be a little bit more of a puzzle box season than season 1.
All Lakshmi flash forwards.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who knew? She was the key. Carol gets infected, episode 1. I think A-bomb, I think, does not play a role this season. I think if you're going to set off an atom bomb, it would have to happen. I can't imagine why you would do it. I don't think it's going to happen. But if they're setting off that atom bomb, that's like the finale of the final season. Because what a way to end a show. That's the ricin of this show, where you kept waiting for them to use it. And then finally he does at the end of the series. It would go down in history. They set off an atom bomb in the finale, and it was insane.
Yeah,
I don't know why, but it did.
I think as far as what they've revealed so far, to me, it's just a deterrent. Like they'll say, if you try to come here and spray your whatever, you know what I mean? We'll just push the button and detonate the bomb. I mean, who even knows what like she got the physical bomb.
Yeah,
I believe that is true. I believe that is what's in there. I don't think that she was like, they could change it, but I feel like the intention is that when he asked her what's in there, she wasn't, it wasn't like saying atom bomb for something else. You know
Vince Gilligan and
is,
company, they generally don't lie to you. And she said atom bomb, and the camera and the music and the tone all reacted as though it's an atom bomb. It cut immediately to an overhead shot and zoomed out, and they knew it was the punchline of the season. So I think it's face value, that's an atom bomb. And I think if it's used, I agree it would have to be as a deterrent, but I don't even think it'll be that. I think she only asked for it as an FU to the hive. To her, it's a punchline. And if it ever comes in handy, I agree it would be as a bluff of like, we're going to set this thing off if we have to. But if they actually do set it off, I predict that's a season 4 thing.
Yeah, a lot of people threw out the idea of it being an EMP, but like, to me, yes, that's true. You could probably disrupt their signal that way, but like you would have to figure out a way how to get it into low orbit. Like, exactly. Like that's not easy.
Yeah.
I also think you can't call them up for a plane to see
right. Is I think the reason they gave her the bomb is because they knew it couldn't be used in any effective way against them, at least at this point. I also they've
already proven they can evacuate Albuquerque.
It's
not essential to their project. So even if they were to blow it up, one A bomb is not going to I mean, we used to whenever we were testing them, we used to blow them up rather like often, like, you know,
Right.
when you think about it.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I went to Las Vegas, they had pictures on the wall of like people watching them blow them up in the desert, not that far from there.
Right. Yeah.
So that's like a thing you can do. Like we decide not to do it anymore, but like,
yeah. And I think if Carol wanted to set off an atom bomb, they would arrange the perfect site for her to do it where it causes minimal damage. Or if she wants to blow some stuff up.
Testing kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was going to say, I'm not sure she even has I haven't done the research, I guess, but I don't know that she has the ability to set it off. Like,
that's what I was
saying
a second ago. Like, we don't even know how that would, like, did she say I want an atom bomb and a button, like a physical?
Right, exactly. Where's the button on this
nuclear football? Nuclear football for this particular one, so that I can set it off if I want to. Like, where would they draw the line there? Who knows?
Yeah.
The main thing with the atom bomb, as far as I'm concerned, is that they didn't know, it wasn't baked into the season. It got added after the fact, and I expect that they can figure out a good reason to make it make sense down the road. But it's not essential to understanding the first season, as far as I'm concerned.
If you want, I did put on my tinfoil hat for a little bit today, and I was like, just let it all go and try and think of a theory. And so the one I came up with, I don't think they'll do it, but if this was another show, I feel like they might. So imagine you get to not season 2. This is more of a, let's say, second half of season 3. Things are off. Things are a little weird. And then finally in the finale, the reveal, Carol, you joined 2 weeks ago. And what we see is that the subjective experience of joining is like living in a Matrix-like environment where it's almost a fantasy world. It's like you're in a dream state. So we can be in that dream state for a period of time, and then the reveal, you already joined. That's more of a Lost style thing. I don't think it'll ever happen on this show. But while I was wearing my tinfoil hat, that was the one I came up with.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of like that.
Thank you.
But I don't know that I think I also agree with your instinct.
My own debunking.
That it's probably not going to happen. But I like it. I like the idea.
It got me thinking about how often have we entered a character's subjective experience on any of these shows, Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, where it actually alters reality. And the only example I could think of is there's one where I can't think of his name. Walter White's Jesse Pinkman. He does drugs and then starts floating. That's the only example I could think of. So this would be that, but for a season.
I would like to see them try to tackle some scenes from the Hive's perspective.
Yeah, we've seen very little of that. A few scenes this season, like when Zosha first is loading bodies onto the truck and then goes to meet up with Carol. There's a couple of other examples, but we spend very little time with just the Hive and nobody else around because I guess, number one, it's only interesting for so long to see, they're doing productive things, cleaning up, making things more efficient, and anything more interesting than that, you want to preserve the mystery of if they're up to something else. Though at this point, we do know they're building that antenna. And that could be visually interesting. So I could imagine that could be a cool cold open for season 2 as you see the Hive just working on something. You're like, what are they doing? Then the camera pans up and it's like, whoa, they've already gotten pretty far along on this big antenna.
I think that they would really not need to make one giant antenna. Like the way the Very Large Array works, where they listen to the signal, is that you can have those different points in different places, so you can make it, like they don't have to be physically connected. It still works as a big unified antenna, even though there's 27 of them or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I see John Bazinet in the chat is saying exactly what you just said, that they would most likely build a linked array, which could still be visually interesting. See this weird,
Yeah, that's one of the things I learned whenever I was making my video for the first episode, was that those things move around. They're like on train tracks, so you can do a thing, but you could even like make them on different planets. I think, you know what I mean? Like you could have one here and one on Mars and whatever, you know what I mean? And that would just be scale. It's interesting. I think that we're probably getting to the end of our time here. What a great show, though. What a fun time.
Yeah, it's I mean, I said it before, but like Better Call Saul ended, had such a satisfying conclusion. I wanted more just because I loved it. And this show is like getting more, but it's sci-fi. So I like it even more because that's my favorite genre. So it's scratching that itch in a way I didn't expect it to be scratched. And there's just the fact that we were able to talk now for almost 2.5 hours after already both individually spending hours per episode, having talked about every single one. And now we can still sit down and we could keep going if, you know, we had the energy to do it. We could keep going for hours.
We very easily could keep going, but what I think is that, you know, it's better to stop so that you can come back to it later, because I feel like we're guaranteed, like we know we're getting 2 seasons, right? I feel like we're guaranteed. I feel like we're guaranteed to get the full. I don't know what would have to change in the world for, like, because it's possible, right? We've seen some pretty crazy things over the last couple of years as far as like the end of the streaming wars and the strike and everything else. You know, like stuff has changed pretty drastically over the last 5 years. But I don't think I don't know what would have to change in order for them not to give them the full run here.
Yeah, agreed. It seems like from interviews, actually, Vince Gilligan has talked about the reception of the show. And he said, like, yeah, it's not for everyone. Thankfully, it doesn't need to be for everyone. A certain number of people need to like it. He kind of said something like that's the business side of it. Like, he doesn't know what that number is. But my impression was that he's pretty confident we have reached enough people. So it does feel like I'm not worried. I feel like we're going to get the rest of this series, which is unusual. Anytime I'm enjoying a sci-fi series, I've been trained.
Yeah, you always have to worry.
It's getting canceled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really do. It's funny because the other show that I'm covering right now, Fallout, is it's one of those things that's in the same thing. Like it feels like it was so popular the first season for Amazon that like there's really nothing they could do to not be able to see the story through like how they'd want to see it. So that's kind of it was something I was thinking about the last week or so whenever I was shifting gears into that. I was like, man, these people really, 2 situations where the first season was enough on paper, at least from a distance, where you can kind of just relax and be like, all right, well, they're gonna get to tell their story. Hopefully it's good.
Yeah.
So I guess we can wrap it up there. Was there anything else that we wanted to say? It's going to be a while before we talk about this again. I'm very little chance that I'll be back next Sunday talking Pluribus.
We'll start the Pluribus Rewatch podcast next week. Back to episode 1. Roll it back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like that because of the way that part of the reason why I do TV is because of how my brain works. Like I can get hyper focused for a period of time, but then once I move on to something else, then I move on to that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So TV is great in that way that I can get super excited about it. But like, as far as like my job, like I would be so much more successful if I just stuck with one thing or like,
That's a harsh lesson I've learned over the last 5 years trying to do this full time is that, I just can't rewire my brain to do it like that. Yeah. Though you have stuck to a niche of covering TV shows on a week to week basis. Yeah. And I feel like that gets you an audience that comes back for one show to another. The bigger issue is when you're changing formats. And that's the harsh lesson I've learned is that if you look at One Take and scroll through it, you're like, what the hell is this channel? It has Raised by Wolves coverage week to week, and then a recap of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, I don't understand who this is for. And it's gotten more focus over time, but yeah.
People don't get it. It's for you. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Just making the stuff you want to see. Like, unfortunately.
But I also have bills to pay, so it needs to be for other people too.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not a very realistic way to do it. I think we both learned those lessons over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Just review Miami Vice, I see.
All right.
It's an idea.
Yeah, it is. And of all the ideas, that's one of them.
It is an idea. All right. So yeah, we'll definitely be back next time they do Pluribus. I have a couple of things that I'd like to do Pluribus related.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we should see that. But I am also starting to get into Fallout. I'm starting to enjoy where that season is heading now. And I've also seen a little bit of Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and I'll be covering that too.
Oh, nice. That's soon, right? Like a week or two, I think.
Yeah, I think it's only a couple of weeks out now.
Okay, cool.
And it's still embargoed, so I can't really say anything about it. But
once we turn the mics off, we'll. No, I'm just kidding.
But anyways, thanks for everyone that came out all season, and it's been a lot of fun. I will be trying to do more streams, but probably not for either of the two shows I just mentioned. We'll see. But like, if I do anything, I'll probably just do a combined, maybe like just a general stream to talk about different things. Like I don't see, just because like both of those are so fandom based and there's so much fandom content out there that it's not that interesting to me. Just review Moonlighting. Moonlighting is a great TV show. I'm old enough to remember whenever that was actually on the air, and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
But going back to the lessons we learned about YouTube, so rolling from Pluribus coverage, now we're on to Moonlight. That's great for audience retention.
Yeah, just go back to go for some show that has relevance. It is an important TV show, but how it's relevant to what's going on right now, I'm not exactly sure.
Golden Girls, that you could do. See, that there's relevance there.
That would be my tinfoil theory, is that to distract the hive, Carol gets them to make new seasons of the Golden Girls because her DVDs have run out.
That is that could be so my brothers and I actually started a Pluribus podcast that has its own RSS feed and everything. Our videos from the channel get posted there. That could be our off-season thing. We'll get through the whole Golden Girls catalog until Pluribus season 2 comes. Hopefully that timing could work out perfectly, because there's a lot of those Golden Girls episodes. That's our off-season thing.
Yeah, Golden Girls is enjoyable.
It is. I've never watched it, but from what I hear, it's quite enjoyable.
I never watched it on purpose. That was one of the things I said, and that is really true. That's not to say that if it was just on the television, that, you know, or if I was flipping through the channels, that I maybe didn't stop on it once or twice, but whenever all of the options were exhausted. But I mean, I've known a million people who loved it and watched massive amounts of episodes with them because of that. You know what I mean? And it's funny. It's a really funny show. Let's wrap it up there. I'm not endorsing this is not a Golden Girls sponsored stream. It's not an endorsement necessarily. It's just an observation. And so we'll be back. I'll be back streaming sometime soon. Gil, thanks. Please go check out his channel, One Take Vids. And what is your One Take podcast? Is that the other one? Yeah,
One Take Vids is the main channel. One Take Podcast will be the secondary channel, where if you enjoy discussion style videos, that's where you want to go. If you enjoy more of the scripted stuff, that'll be on One Take Vids. And thank you, Pete, for having me on. I was so glad you did this, because it's so hard to align the schedule, especially as the holidays came up. My dad was visiting, and I wanted to do it, but Sunday night when the family's hanging out, I couldn't make it happen. But so I was glad you were able to pull this together, because I always enjoy talking to you. And
Yeah.
if we find a way to do
Same.
it between, I mean, if we wait for the next season of Pluribus, it could be 2028, 2029. So hopefully there's opportunities between now and then. I know you talked about getting more streams going. I've always flirted with the idea. It's always hard to figure out how to fit it into everything. I do want to start
Yeah.
streaming more. So we'll keep in touch for sure. And I'd love to do something like this again.
All right. Yeah. Like I said, check him out. Check back here. If you're not into Fallout, then just wait because some new stuff will be coming. That's what I'm hoping for, Gil, is I'm hoping for a surprise to come out of nowhere. Some new sci-fi property that'll get us all excited again, because there is someone's asking if I can get golden grams in Vietnam. I would think yes, if I wanted to. I think that's probably true. There are international supermarkets. I mean, I'm like, I live in Hanoi. It's a giant city. Like, there's not like, if you really wanted to get anything, I'm sure you probably can.
I'll ship you some if you really need some and you can't find it.
Yeah, but yeah. So thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for supporting the channel, and